Okay, in today's lesson we're going to learn about the different types of notes and some of the different meanings and how to draw them on the staff is what we're going to cover today. Okay, so we have different types of notes. They all look slightly different. The reason we have different notes is because they're all worth different values. Some are long, and as you go down they get shorter and shorter. Okay, so this is quite a long note. These are really short notes. We're going to talk about what they're called, what they look like, and some different terminology for them. This can be a little warning here. This can be a little confusing. There are lots of different names for the same thing, depending on where you're from and things like that. I'll explain. So first of all, I'll just talk about what they look like. We have a circle. Then we have a circle with what we call a stem. We call that a stem. A coloured in circle with a stem. We have a coloured in circle with a stem that is joined to another one with one line. And then down the bottom here we have coloured in with a stem, and they're joined together with two lines. So let's talk about the different names for each of these notes. Actually, before we do that, we're going to talk about how many beats they're worth. Okay, so the top one is worth the most, and that's over here. It's worth 4 beats. The second one is worth 2 beats. This one here. The coloured in one with the stem is worth 1 beat. These ones here are worth half a beat each. And these ones here are worth a quarter of a beat each. Now, for those who are mathematically inclined, you may notice that the value is just halving each time we go down a line. Okay, so it starts at 4 beats, it then goes to 2, 1, half and a quarter. So it's just getting halved each time. Okay, the other thing, well actually, let's talk about the different names. Here in Australia, England and Australia, we mostly call them by these names. In America, they often use these names, and we'll go through those. But here, we mostly use these names. And let's just go through them. So this one here, which is worth 4 beats, is called a semibreve. The 2-beat note is called a minim. A 1-beat note is called a crotchet. The half-beat note is called a quaver. And the quarter of a beat note is called a semiquaver. But in America, they refer to them as something different. They will call that top one, which we call a semibreve, they'll call that a whole note. The minim, which is worth 2 beats, they call a half note. A crotchet, which is worth 1 beat, they call a quarter note. A quaver, which is worth half a beat, they call an 1/8 note. A semiquaver, which is a quarter of a beat, they call a 16th note. So you can see it's quite confusing. Don't be worried if it doesn't make sense straight away. The more we use these notes, you'll get used to it. So, but it can be very confusing, and we actually have to know all of the names. But we will, in terms of calling them, we will mostly refer to them as these ones, your semibreve and your semiquavers and things like that. But as you can see, it can get confusing. Right over the far side, we also have what we call rhythmic names for them when we get into clapping rhythms and dictating rhythms. So a crotchet, and you probably would have heard of this, is often referred to as a tar. You may have done that in primary school music. Quavers are often referred to as TTs, and the semiquavers are often referred to as tickers. Okay, I haven't included the top 2. Okay, so that's all the different names to do with the different types of notes. And as you see, it can be confusing. A quaver is worth half a beat, and sometimes it's called an 1/8 note. So quite confusing. Okay, a semiquaver, which is worth a quarter of a beat, can be referred to as a 16th note. So quite confusing. I'm just going to talk a little bit now about where these names actually come from. So when you have a bar of music, The most common time signature is what we call 4/4, which means 4 beats in a bar. Okay, the majority of music, certainly the majority of music you would hear on the radio is mostly in 4/4, 4 beats in every bar. That means the bar is going 1, 2, 3, 4. Next bar, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 beats in every bar. So these names here are talking about how many you would fit into a bar of 4/4. So a whole note, you would get 1 into a bar of 4/4, only 1. That's why it's called a whole note. Whereas a half note, you would get 2 into a bar of 4/4, and so on. A quarter note, which is worth 1 beat, you would get 4 of those into a bar of 4/4. So that might seem a little confusing, but that's just to let you know where those names come from. If that doesn't make too much sense, don't worry about that too much. We just need to know that they're called lots of different things, and hopefully this will help you with all those different names. I'll say it again, we mainly use these names, and we have to know how many beats each one is worth. Just over here, sometimes these notes are not always joined together, and they're written out on their own. If they're written on their own, they're written like that, with a single tail for a quaver, and with a semiquaver with a double tail, like that. Cool. So that's the different types of notes. The last part of this video is I'm just going to draw some of these notes on the staff, because it's actually trickier than you think to actually draw some of these notes correctly, because there are some mistakes you can make. So I'll draw a treble clef, our most common clef. Okay, so I'm going to start with just some crotchets. So here we go. I'm going to draw a note down here. Now it's important, where does the stem go? Okay, because it changes depending on where the stem direction. I'll talk about that in a tick. But for this particular note, the stem, if the note is in the bottom half, the stem goes up on the right. Okay, so that's how you draw a crotchet. But sometimes the stem goes the other way around. So if the note is, this is not a hard and fast rule, there are definitely exceptions to this. It's not always the case. But generally, if the note is below the middle line, the stem will go up on the right. If the note is in the top half, above the middle line, the stem goes down on the left, just to confuse us. Okay? So I'm going to draw these two notes incorrectly so that you can see what I mean, how not to draw them. So if I drew this one here and went up on the left, and I drew this note here and went down on the right, those are incorrect. They look wrong, okay? So I'm going to put a circle around that and say no. Do not draw them like that. The stems go up on the right and down on the left, and generally the stem direction is determined by where the note is. If the note is in the middle, doesn't really matter, it's up to you. You can go up or down. As I said, this is not a hard and fast rule. You'll definitely find music that will have a note up high with a stem going up. There are many reasons why that can happen, so it's not a hard and fast rule. Let's go through some of the other ones. Okay, so a minim, so like that. And as I said just before, you can see, you will often see a minim drawn like that, with the stem going up. Let's draw a semiquaver. I'm going to draw a semiquaver now. I'm going to do it 4 A's, treble clef. And I'm just going to go through a common mistake when people draw a semiquaver. Sometimes a lot of people will draw a semiquaver like that, and their intention is to draw a semiquaver, but what is wrong with that? I wonder if you know, if you can see what's wrong with that. The answer, of course, is there's meant to be 2 lines joining all those notes together. So what I have actually drawn there is 4 quavers together. and you can join 4 quavers up together. But my intention was to draw 4 semiquavers. So I've accidentally left out the double line. Okay, so it should look like that. Okay, that's a very common mistake, and I'll draw it over here as well. The intention is to draw a ticka or semiquavers, and a lot of people draw that, but that's not correct. You need the 2 lines. Like that. That is a ticka, or semiquavers, however you want to call it. So just to recap, we've just gone through the different types of notes, and their different names, and they get referred to in many different ways. Here we're mostly going to call them by these names, and we're going to talk about how many beats they're worth. We do need to know this, and I forgot to say before, there's a reason we need to know these names. When we use programs like Logic and Finale, those programs are written and made in America. So when they have notes, they have these notes, they will refer to them as half notes, whole notes, and things like that. So we do need to know that when we use those programs, because they will refer to them as those type of notes. So yeah, unfortunately, we need to know all of this, and you'll get used to it. Cool, that finishes today's lesson.